Welcome to the Optimalist Podcast, where we examine just what it takes to ensure humans flourish in the age of AI. I am Sarah, your host through this exploration of mindfulness, attention, focus, and motivation, all elements of human flourishing. So how do we cultivate them? Sean Gaillard is principal at App State Academy at Middle Fork. He is the author of both The Pepper Effect and a forthcoming book on educational courage for Routledge Publishing. He is also the host of the Principal Liner Notes podcast. Listen as Sean and I discuss what it means to meet presence as a leader, to respect your biological and mental need for pause in your day, and the role of self-awareness in being effective at any mindful routine. All this and more in today's conversation. Oh yeah, and we might even talk about creativity.
You know, when the one word thing manifests itself every year, you know, when people choose one word to aspire to, one year I'll do presence. And if I don't want to be redundant, and maybe I do need to do the same word. That's the undercurrent. I think it's important to be present for ourselves and each other so that we can help each other and be more empathetic. Last week, you know this, I share this with you personally. I don't mind this being in the podcast, but my daughter was in a pretty serious car wreck. And I think a lot of the originator of presence comes from for my family. Mm-hmm. And the gig that I'm in as principal, you know, there's a lot of things that pull on you. There's a lot of things that you have to do. There's a lot of things that you must do. But in order to do those things, for me, it starts with presence. It starts with being present for myself, being present for my and being present for my family. And if I have those things aligned, and if I feel that I'm giving the proper and essential presence for the people I love, then that helps me be more in tune with the people I serve. Mm-hmm. There's a little riff there on presence.
That's it. That's my answer. What do you think keeps people from reaching that state as often as they might want to?
Oh man, there's so many things, you know, so I think the noise that is the external noise that's in the world, right? So social media, you know, we can go through a whole laundry list of things. I also think too, it's the noise within ourselves, the doubts, the pressure, the lack of grace that we give ourselves. And you know, frankly, I don't really think the world has that presence as a value when there are so many substitutes for presence, right? You know, so when we have, you know, instead of writing a letter or being, which in itself, that's kind of like a substitute too. But you know, I guess I'm referring to some of all of the digital, you know, avatars mm-hmm. that we have, some metaphorical, some literal, that keep us from that sort of engagement and being present for ourselves and each other. I don't think it's something that's valued.
I just want to stick with that phrase. I like the way you're talking about this, and using that phrase substitutes for presence. I don't think, I say something similar and I can't remember what it is right now, but, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say that exact term to describe what we're talking about. But if you do think about that, you know, those words, substitutes for presence, I think we all kind of can imagine the kinds of things you're talking about, especially when you mm-hmm. branch into the digital world. But what does that mean when we substitute it for presence? I think there's a couple of ways you could take that. It's substituting you actually paying attention to whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. It could be It doesn't have to be something serious. It could be, or work. It could be as simple as having a meal with people. So substitutes for that. But then also, what is it substituting? Like, what are you getting, in place of being in that moment?
I think when we substitute that, and put those other things in front of us or behind us, I don't think, frankly, yeah, you might get a sense of accomplishment if we're all multitasking. You might get a little bit ahead, but I think we miss out on the moment. We miss out on the moment. We miss out on the potential for that moment, that potential for engagement right here, right now. You and I are in this conversation, even though we're, roughly 3,000, 4,000 miles away from each other.
What do you mean? We're in the same room. I don't know what you're talking.
Oh, that's right. Oh, did I? Wait a minute. Yes, we're in the
My
Optimalist
very professional
studios here.
Studio.
We're in Abbey Road Studios right now in Studio 2.
But I like where you're going with that even though, we all, so much of everyone's communication these days, no matter what form it takes, is from afar. But you were saying, even though that is true.
Yeah. And I think, and I think even though, like right now, you and I are, literally apart from each other, I am doing my very best right now. I'm talking with my friend Sarah. I'm looking at you. I'm engaged with you. I'm not looking at my phone. My phone is actually is on the other side of the room right now. I'm in a room. I'm actually in my daughter's room here at home. Which is like my little studio, but I'm doing everything to make sure that my ears are tuned up to you, and I'm doing my best to compensate that. Even though there's this wonderful platform that you have that we're on, I want to do everything to kind of overcompensate that the fact that we're not in the same room, we're not breathing the same space. And I think that's so important in our world right now when we talk about engaging with folks. I mean, because you have these substitutes and you have these digital pathways to connect, whether it's phone or Zoom or Squadcast or whatever it may be. I think we have to almost exaggerate, but in an intentional way, listening and being in tune. Because the other thing too is I and I'm sure you do too. We're multitaskers, and we have all these tricks to show that we're listening, right?
Oh, that's the operative word there is tricks. Like, I think we're all kind of really fooling ourselves by jumping on the popularization of the idea that you even can multitask. All it really is doing is creating a false sense of accomplishment, like you were saying before. Maybe you're getting a tiny drop in each bucket, but you're not filling a bucket. Even like if you think of it as a personal thing, or if you want to think of it as an accomplishment thing, you're not fulfilling your full potential in any way. And I think you also we get so used to the feeling, like the actual biological feeling in your body when you are pulled in different directions. And it doesn't even have to be multitasking. It could be allowing yourself to be pulled, your attention to be split. And then like mentally, like I'm thinking how hot it is. I'm thinking about the fact that like, what do I have to do next? Am I going to go to a yoga class at 6:00? Like, we're all like pulling ourselves in these things. And then I don't have my phone right here, but I know that if I did, I'd see that I have like 4 texts from my mother. And then we've trained ourselves to think like, or we've made it okay for us to split that attention and think, I must reply to this person, no matter who it is now. And you don't. Like, you don't have to physically be in contact with people all day long. And I think that we get used to what that feels like in our body and think that that's normal. Like, that's how we're supposed to feel like. And it's an anxiety. It's a stress that is chronic and doesn't go away. And then when we do have that moment of pause, as you've been saying to us in the last week or so, when we do have that moment and
That's
you're
right.
pulled into the present, it can be scary, I think, if you are not used to being in that kind of state where all the other stuff disappears.
Yeah, but I also think too, if I'm on the receiving end of someone's presence, let's think about that for a second. I think back to when I was a kid. I was in a pivotal basketball game, and my dad was in the stands, and I did something that I don't typically do in basketball. I'm a great rebounder and I'm a great inside shot, but I am not a very good outside shot. And he had been practicing and working with me and encouraging me, and I was afraid to do an outside shot. And I was 12, and I'll never forget this. Pivotal game, it was the championship game, eighth grade basketball, CYO. I get the ball, and instinctually I dribbled, which I was afraid to do because again I'm a rebounder and I was a center. That's all I could do. But I dribbled and I turned around and did a turnaround jump shot, all net. And I'll never forget this, and it still stays with me. My father, I don't remember seeing him, but I remember hearing him and feeling his presence. Like he was in my head, like do the da 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 da, and then hearing him yell and cheer and that joy. Now this is 1982. If my father had been looking at his phone, if my father had been talking to someone else or what have you, but he was completely zoomed in on me, and that kind of presence is powerful. It's powerful in music, right? When I love to see our band, the Beatles. Let's just go there for just a second.
It's our band, everybody. Did you hear that? It belongs to us.
It is our band. Yes. Nobody else. Nobody else can claim it. It's just Sarah and Sean's. We are. But there's this wonderful moment, and I love when musicians do the nod or do the
like the check. They're checking with each other. Yeah.
Like, hey, you did a good move. Hey, good bit, pal. And there's this beautiful moment in the Get Back documentary when the Beatles are performing their final concert on the rooftop with Billy Preston. Yes. And they're playing the song Get Back, and right at Billy Preston's solo. Now there's a whole lot to unpack there on a musical level, on a cultural level, on a lot of levels. But to see all four of the Beatles turn at Billy Preston and smile and give him that nod and again showing that, hey, we're present for you. And then you see the joy on his face, and he plays even harder, right? There's so much value and there's so much value in what one can do when we value someone else's presence, when we dignify that and acknowledge that.
And I like what you just said about we're doing this for you. I mean, immediately my mind goes to honestly, that of course they're not thinking about this at all, but what they're doing is modeling something there as well, right? This is how you show your appreciation for the people around you and for the work that you do. And it's how you form a connection to do even better work together, to make something beautiful that you are going to put out into the world. You cannot do that without that attention and without that presence. And I think it's really wonderful to frame it in that way. I don't know that people often think about it in that exact way. And it brings in that creative aspect too. What sense does that state of mind and being create a specific way that the creative person has to operate? So many people that we deem as the most creative in any field are people that we often think of as, as loners. And I don't know that that's a popular thing to think about anymore because I don't think really very true. It's just that they need that space, right, for their attention to be completely present. And often that means separating yourself from all the stuff and people and being alone for long stretches of time, and then coming back into the world and seeing what's out there, or saying like, hey, look what I did. And that's often recommended still, like people, when you're creating something from scratch, to get that, where is that focus coming from? How do you find presence? And I think it becomes even harder in the world that we're now finding ourselves in.
Absolutely. And there is, we'll call it solitude.
Yeah.
And cue Neil Diamond's Solitary Man, right? Solitude can be, or loneliness. I get what you're saying. Like you have to, in order to create and in order to express ourselves fully, sometimes we do have to tune into solitude. And it kind of goes back to harkens back to what I was saying earlier, like that presence that we have to give for ourselves. And that requires a level of solitude. That requires a level of retreat. That requires a level of pause. Now, not all of us can do what the Beatles did. Here I go. And travel to Rishikesh, right? And study transcendental meditation and go to an ashram and live communally, but then also meditate all day. And guess what they did? They came up with the White Album, right? They came back with a suitcase full of songs, to make a masterpiece. And a lot of those songs came from meditation, came from being alone and removing themselves from Beatlemania. And a lot of the great works of art and music and ideas come from that. I'm nowhere near the level of you as a podcaster, and I'm nowhere near the level of the Beatles doing the White Album, but I have a 37-minute commute during the day. And, sometimes during the course of that day, I will do an impromptu, like I did one today. I did an impromptu podcast. I had about 5-10 minutes with a thought that I just had to get out.
In the car? Wow.
In the car. Yeah. I just do it on the iPhone and I just riff.
Interesting.
And, but there is something that I value in that the solitary nature of my commute. And sometimes I'll come up with an idea. Sometimes I won't. I value those moments and I value those times, that I can do that. I think it's important for others, especially school leaders, especially for educators, right? Who, I mean, you've been in the gig, you've been in the life, where, it's a gig, right? It's lesson plan to assessment to PLC to faculty meeting to budget meeting to whatever it may be. And, all of those things aren't bad, but where in the course of the day, wouldn't it be neat if there was a scheduled time for that kind of a pause? And everyone valued that. I mean, we have, I'm sure there's schools and organizations that have that level, right? I mean,
there are, and there are, but they are typically harder to find. And it's one of the things that I do when I try to plan ahead for guests for this podcast, is to try to find in intervals people that are either running programs at schools that do things like this, but they're out there. They're just not common. And I don't know. And then it feels like something that, just a small section of people are having exposure to. And I think the idea is what you're saying too, is that we all need to think about, even if it starts really small on a micro level, how we can integrate that pause and not just think of it as an occasional thing that we do only when we feel like we need something, like we drastically need to stop. It usually becomes true that people don't stop and reorganize their life until something drastic happens, or they feel they have a panic attack and suddenly they're like, maybe I should work on my stress levels or something like that. And it's like, and that's never going to go away. We all, in different ways, work ourselves or stretch ourselves thin until we can't do anything about it. But as far as the work day or the school day, like thinking about how we can integrate these things, that pause, instead of waiting until we're only doing it when we're asked to, like to fulfill some requirement. I love the whole meditation that you were describing there with the Beatles, but like it also reminds me of this idea that you don't necessarily have to only separate yourself into that solitary space because of getting away from things and clearing out distractions. It's also part of getting better attention and getting better at pausing to realize that the mind also needs that space to wander. And I think we often place that traditionally, like, and it's not just kids, but we're thinking of it in terms of the, framework of schools. So that kids are on my mind, but like the kid who's staring out the window, when you are able to remove yourself, mind wandering is a form of thinking. It's not a form of laziness. It's a form of like there are things being created in that brain. And that's what they say, like, when you take up that pause in the middle of your day or at the end of the day and in between the transitions of your day and go for a bike ride and go for a long walk. I mean, you're not doing serious thinking, but it's often when the best solutions arise, right? When you let your mind just kind of go off and it's not structured. And I think and a lot of people that we've seen, like with those far off looks staring into the distance, are the people you might label as like, that's a really creative person. They often are intertwined. I think we see an overlap there. There wasn't really a question there. That was just me. Sometimes I end my rambles in a question.
No, I like that riff because the immediate connection I made as you were sharing that with the the students staring off in the distance is, I was that student. I'm still that student.
Me too.
And okay, we were both English teachers at one point, and I tell you, when you were sharing that, Sarah, I was thinking of Whitman's When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. Here and just like in that poem, kids are reprimanded. I was reprimanded. I'm still kind of reprimanded for when I drift off, whether it's in a meeting or what have you. But it's not laziness. It's not loafing around. It's the mind, my mind, our minds need that trap door.
Yeah.
We need that release to roam a little bit, regardless of what personality type we are, what we fill out on the Myers-Briggs test. Our minds need that space. We need that space to kind of roam and riff and roll, right?
Yeah. And I think the thing that concerns us the most, like when we talk about this stuff in like the context of this podcast, or even when we're talking about engageable related activities and how people are using it, we think about allowing, like, how do we allow for what it is that we're talking about right now, that wandering. I like that you called it that trap door, but also understand that sometime we want to allow for the moments where we can bring our full attention to something, and how do we get better with that? And so what we talk about a lot is the breaking up of things in more manageable, I hate even calling it just time, but really more manageable chunks of attention. Because when it comes down to it, if I'm always half paying attention during a meeting, at some point I have to think, what am I responsible for during this meeting? And what can I do to not always be like, am I living up to I could be doing better work if I didn't have to ask again at the end of this, what happened? Or I have to look at the meeting notes, or what could I have contributed? And so we think about, like, what does that mean for the way we all structure our time? We shouldn't be sitting in something for an hour. We shouldn't be doing our math homework for an hour. We should be doing it for 15 minutes and then pausing, and then getting up, and then maybe daydreaming for 20 minutes and then coming back. It's not a linear, like what you're talking about, going through that trap door, like allowing space for the trap door to exist outside of the context of something that is formal. How do
Yeah.
we leave this space and then come back to the space? It's like, it's that breath. It's a big breath in and then a coming back to center. And that's what we think about a lot. And we love hearing how people from all different walks of life interpret that and think about that and bring that into their own lives.
So a couple of things come to mind, and as much as I might idealize, good old Thoreau, writing Walden in Concord, Massachusetts, and I lived and worked not far from there, and Thoreau still, as much as he kind of wandered around the woods. And wrote and thought and meditated and did those things, he still had to chop wood. He still had to, he still had to build a fire. He still had to survive.
Right.
He still had to do things. And I think that's important. Practically speaking, I like how you framed it, with 5 minutes. I did a thing at a place where I was principal, where I called it "Here Comes the Sun" space. Actually, White Album space is what I used to call it, and I had a great secretary who put it in my calendar because I shared with her this concept of white space, which was au courant at the time and was all over Twitter and what have you. And I thought, and again, I thought that was important. Like, you have to have dedicated time to just that's your time to think and dream and ideate and those things. So she would put in my calendar like these little 10, 15 minute segments, and she called it either "Here Comes the Sun" space or White Album space. And she would say, "All right, Sean, it's your time." And usually I might just, sit outside on a warm day and just breathe. Or I might, just go to a classroom where I knew, it was happening and I could sit and not be pulled into anything.
Mm-hmm.
And even I think about us as in our respective platforms and our respective roles. I mean, I can see you, Sarah, tweeting out something and saying, "All right, take 5 minutes to breathe."
And the whole world listens to me in 1 second.
Hey, I do, but you never know that might ripple someplace, or even if not on Twitter, you and I as thought partners and bandmates, maybe it's just a little text. Hey, have you pressed your pause button today? Or hey, come back, depause, come back.
Where are
you?
Are you
Where
lost?
are you? And maybe those moments of presence start not only as moments and start on a small level, but, again, I started this off with presence for ourselves and being present for each other. And that presence is the pathway to connection. That presence is the pathway to listening to each other. That presence is the pathway to connection, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it is finding that connected partner or that accountability partner or thought partner to help you with those moments throughout the day, whether it is on Twitter, whether it is through DM, whether it is through text, or if it's in your building or schoolhouse or organization or wherever it is that you may be. Hey, you and I can see me doing this as a principal, like, maybe pairing up teachers or something like that, or teachers could do that amongst themselves and make that commitment if they so choose. I think that's so, again, here we are being present for each other and look at the generating, right? There's value.
Yeah. And I think that, the connection part is what, when people, I think, mislabel certain aspects of social media as connection. And I know that we've met via Twitter, so many people that are involved in all the avenues of the work that I do every day are people I've met via the internet. But I don't know that most people are using it in that way, intentionally to build a community or to build a network or to find people who have great ideas that you would never think of that you want to be around more, like that kind of thing. But I do think that when people use, I think, more ubiquitous platforms like Instagram, they are like going back to what we said at the beginning when you talked about substitutes for presence. If we're substituting presence in person or in real life with a person or a group with those kind of, I guess, fleeting connections and constant scrolling and liking and commenting, we're never really anchoring ourselves in something that's real and stable. There's no anchor. And so like us hearing each other's voices, and I listen to you, I respond to you, you listen to me, you respond, that back and forth of just a conversation is an anchor in the present. And it's like, you're caring what I'm saying, I'm caring what you're saying. We care about the fact that we're recording this, and then we release it, and then other people can listen to it, and then they can respond to us after listening to it and say something to other people, so that it becomes this chain of like that all begins with us being present in a conversation. And if we were recording this conversation and we weren't in that space, I don't think that any of that ripple effect happens, And so when we replace this anchoring, I think, of the self in this world with something that's kind of fleeting and not really connected, all of that falls apart. But we keep doing it because we're addicted to finding it, right? We want that connection. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I'm going to keep scrolling through these 5 apps until I find what makes me not feel bad, or not feel this thing or the other thing, or not feel, or I'm really looking to be distracted from something that I don't want to face. And I think that's what a lot of it comes down to. It's become really hard for people to sit in a room with each other and be themselves. Well, I just said a lot of stuff there. I don't know.
I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did. That's a rewindable moment.
I mean, even when you're talking earlier about just flashes of, it doesn't even have to be the Beatles. It could be anybody doing anything artistic from that time. I think what amazes people so much when they watch things like Get Back is, and I don't know if they would be able to explain it in this way, but what is amazing when you hear people's reactions to something like that is that what they're reacting to is the fact that everybody involved in that process is involved in the process 100%. Who's sitting around for 5 hours at a time and just talking about what seems like nothing? And then things are being pulled, like really, it could be mundane, nothing conversation, and then stuff comes out. And then that's where that is the creative process. And that connects to what we were talking about before. Like it might seem like the thoughts are unrelated and they're all over the place and no one's really focused on anything, but that is a form of presence. It is a form of you have to let yourself go and not be tied to any sort of pattern that you might, or expectation. It's like that, that's part of it. You have to be able to take that risk and say, what could come from this?
And to add to that I'll riff with you. Isn't it neat when you get with people who, and I'm talking about the creative process. So and it could be a band, it could be an acting troupe, it could be an English department. When you find that others are invested and in the art or in the creativity, and they're present for the vision and present for each other and present for the value, when all of those things sync up, then you do have something that is akin to the Beatles, right? Mm-hmm. And hey, we gotta pull this show together. We don't know if we're gonna play on the roof or in the desert or on a cruise ship, but we believe in what we're doing. I believe in the person that is with me, and we're present for each other. We're present for our vision. We're present for our ideas. And now we're going to create this thing and see what comes of it, or see what happens. You don't have that too often. I would think. And but what you just said, that rewindable moment, to me I think a lot of creativity and that presence is that investment. We're investing in it because I know if I'm in a band with Sarah that I'm going to not only get something out of this, or it's going to make me a better player, or it's going to make the song better, but it's going to give joy to someone else, or it's going to inspire someone else. I mean, that's how I roll.
I am thinking about a couple of things that I was going to bring up before, but now I think they're even more relevant. But when you connect this then back to your role in your school, as a leader, why is it important it could be just, I know part of this is an obvious answer. Why is it important for leaders to take on this mentality a little bit, to step into the shoes of, most people don't think of themselves as a creator. We think of creators as very specific people, but to step into the shoes of like, I am someone, every human being is a creative person. We're all creative. We're all born of creativity and with creativity. And so why is it important for leaders to pause and think about that? The fact that a lot of their job is to inspire, to model, to show people how to practice. Like, maybe I just answered the question, but what I'm asking, why is it important?
You did actually.
Sorry.
Sarah, that's cool. Whether we like it or not, whatever role that we're in, although I am principal, I'm not your average typical principal. I never have been. And I eschew that because I believe, getting back to dad, my dad, we're all called to lead. We're all called to contribute, and we're all called to get off the bench and aspire to that. Now, if you just so happen to be the principal or director or whatever, you do have a responsibility for the people you serve, and you have a responsibility to the organization that you are helping to build in conjunction with others. And there's a lot that rests upon us. There's a lot that is expected of us. I find, as I'm entering year 32 of education and year, I guess, 16 as a principal, that I find that when you intentionally remove yourself from the mania and you carve out time to whether it is for Here Comes the Sun space or White Album space or what have you, we do set the tone for our buildings. And, Todd Whitaker, who is someone I have great respect for, and I am proudly the Sundance Kid to his Butch Cassidy, said that when the principal, and you can substitute principal for leader, teacher, educator, whatever it may be, if you're in some role where you're serving or collaborating or working with others. But the quote is when the principal sneezes, everyone in the building feels it, right?
Right.
So I got to make sure that my temperature, my pulse, is in check, because if I do go in, and I'm human, we're all human, whether it's the chainsaw outside or the temperature, the hot temperature, right, in LA, or maybe the personal or professional snub that we may feel, or whatever it may be. The coffee's not cold enough or hot enough, whatever it is, we're still human, but we have a responsibility to keep ourselves in check and to fill our buckets and to fill our souls with meaning and time and presence, because others are going to feel that. Others are going to pick up on that. Others are going to know that. And I think if we have that connectedness with others, and we are aware that, whatever it is that I say or do or feel is going to impact others, good or bad. And if we're in tune with that, man, then we're on the rooftop, nodding at Billy Preston, smiling, right? And we're making get back, and we're making history, and we're filling the space with so much good on a cold winter's London blustery day, right?
Yeah. And this is now for everybody listening. This is, I think, the third time that Sean and I have had a conversation in the last week and a half. And before that, we'd never spoken to each other before. So
that's right.
Like not one word before. And now we were just scheduling things back and forth here. But I think that just means that we're on our way to our own rooftop, and this is just a practice space that we're recording in right now. And that's I think a great way to segue into a little segment here that we bring in as we're winding down, kind of getting ready to wrap up the episode. And I know that you probably know what it is because I know you listen to this podcast, but thinking about what other things that you consume media-wise, whether it's something you're reading or recently have read, listening to, and that could be something that's musical or a podcast in any way, or even watching, anything that is making its way in and out of your brain that is can give us a nice, picture of what's forming your mind these days.
Absolutely. Well, I have a stack here because I knew this was coming, and I've come prepared for the homework assignment. So I'm a voracious reader, and I am one of those guys that I can't read just one book. I got to read like 2 or 3 books. So I have 3 books that I'm reading right now.
I do the same thing, by the way.
I know you do.
So at the same time. Yep.
Yeah, at the same time, I'm like, all right, let me read. Okay, chapter.
Yep.
So I am rereading and revisiting, and I think our first conversation together compelled me to pick this up sooner rather than later, because every year I reread The Great Gatsby.
Me too.
And that novel is if I could teach that book all year, when I was an English teacher, I would do it. So I'm revisiting that book right now, and I'm on.
Are you timing it to the season? Because that's what you have to do.
I know you told me to do that, and I wish I could do it that way. But
you have to time it. You can still. You have plenty of time. You have to be at the ending chapter when they're on the green lawns and looking over the lawn. You have to be where he says things start over again in the fall.
Yes.
If you find that line, you have about a month to get there. Give time.
Well, it's well time. I'm on page 68. I'm on chapter 3 because he has just done the famous that's July 5th timetable list.
Yes.
Yeah, chapter 4 rather.
Okay.
So I'm probably a few weeks. Yeah, I'm probably in line with the season. So I'm reading that book. A couple of weeks ago, I was able to attend with colleagues from the App State University lab schools. We did 2 days of training on crucial conversations, and it's a book that I value. But I realized that there's a kind of companion books that go with it, and I am reading a wonderful book called Crucial Influence: Leadership Skills to Create Lasting Behavior Change. And it's a wonderful book, and a lot of it too kind of connects to some of the things that you value, we value, and have talked about when it comes to mindfulness and listening and empathy and connecting with others. So I'm greatly enjoying that book. And then this book I just picked up yesterday. If you kind of know, I'm a music geek and I love to read music biographies, and I always love to draw lessons from musicians. One, for many reasons, I'm inspired by music. It's the universal divine voice that connects all of us. But I play guitar. I'm not any good. I've been in various ragtag bands. But I just picked up a new biography on the Allman Brothers Band entitled Brothers and Sisters. So it talks about the band in their kind of second incarnation and how they came back after 2 of the original members tragically, unexpectedly died. So I always love when a band reinvents itself and pulls it together or gets on a rooftop. So I love those. So that's what's on the bookshelf right now. In addition to Tony Bennett is someone who's on heavy rotation right now, and I've been listening to a lot of his music in the wake of his passing last week, and really diving deeply into his life and his emphasis on excellence and artistry and humility in his music. So that's been speaking to me.
You know, there are some, I'm sure they're not lost on you. There are threads through a lot of the art and creative people that you follow. And I think that, and even just I guess it, falls into the category of art, but listing the things that you're reading or about to start reading, like there is that, that drive to connect the stuff, the subject of books and stuff to what it is that we do and how we live our actual real lives. But there's also the way you just said, the striving for excellence and reading about people that excellence doesn't look like one thing. It looks like a billion things. And so it's like, finding those billions of stars and connecting them. Is the way I'm thinking about, what is the line that's through all of the stuff that you admire. And that is so, publicly in a lot of what the work that you do and the things that you write. You're not shy about those connections. So I thought I would, point out that I'm even hearing it in what you're listing right now, which is really cool. I did want to, before we, end and go into my last question here, I did want to point out, I meant to say earlier, when you're talking about Thoreau, I can't let this conversation go without mentioning that I did spend the last 2 weeks of a summer, maybe 15 years ago. It had to have been at least 15 years ago. The last couple of weeks of a summer I spent in a replica of Thoreau's cabin in the woods, way in the mountains of upstate New York.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes. And it was it's like, if you look at the cabin that he lived in, someone built a replica. It was in I'm trying to think of the mountains now. I can't remember, but way upstate New York. And, the point of it was on property that was owned by this like mountaineering guy who just built a few random cabins throughout the property. I mean, it was like hundreds of acres of property he owned within the mountains, and like with rivers going through it and all sorts of things. So he had built very far apart from each other a few different cabins for people to come up and do like backcountry getaways. And they were really only meant to be like short little spurts of time. And they had ones that were big enough for a family. So I was one of the first people to stay in it, because I don't think he would let people stay in the winter. I think it was too harsh to stay in that cabin. But it was literally, you would walk in, it was a fireplace, one chair, one like rocking chair, one 19th century version of a single bed. Like, it's very tiny. Everything in it was replica. Like, it was like a feather bed. Like, all the things in it were replica. But that's what I did. I did that for 2 weeks at the end of the summer, and didn't allow myself to have contact with anybody, and just listened to the wolves howling in the night, and read, and that was it. That's my story.
Is phenomenal, Sarah.
And I was trying to find it online, and I don't think that it exists anymore. But yeah, so that exists somewhere. If anyone knows, let me know. We'll hold the optimalist retreat there.
Give us a DM on that one. That I like that. I value that a whole lot, Sarah. That there's the replica cabin at in Concord, Massachusetts, that is right there on the site. Near the site where the original cabin was built.
And you can't stay in it, though. I think I had looked into that.
I don't think you can stay there. No, you can't.
Yeah,
you can walk around in it. But if Don Henley is listening, Don Henley of the Eagles,
sure
who spearheaded he probably is, who spearheaded the project, whatever it was, 20, 30 some years ago, to preserve Walden Woods. Maybe there could be something there, that he might be able to do for you, after he's done with the Eagles, But all kidding
if
aside,
anyone wants
I
to
really
build me a cabin, just reach directly out to me. I'm now taking applications for people who'd like to build me a cabin. Now we have to get our attention back, Sean, for just a minute more.
Yes.
So 1 minute more. So the last thing I want to ask you, and I would love if you framed this in the context of your particular role as a principal, and also in maybe the context of working with other leaders. But is there a method of practicing to have better attention, or that you use that you believe works, or that you use to bring yourself to full attention, that you would be able to describe or recommend to people out there in the universe?
Yeah. So what I really strive to do, and I look at the world many different ways, and ways that you might normally look at, but I look at the world as bookends. And so the beginning of something, I think, has to have a certain resonance because it's going to impact the middle. And then the end of something, whether that's part of your calendar or whatever, is going to have an impact. And then you have to have a little transition time along the way. So I really try to, at the beginning of my day, before I do anything, I try not to fill it with stuff, right? The principal stuff. I try to start the day when I get into the schoolhouse where I might be writing a note of gratitude to someone, or I might be shooting an email of gratitude to someone, or I might find a nook of the school that I don't normally go to or typically go to or go to enough, and I try to be there. And then I do what an old boss of mine called the walk. Then you just walk. You walk the building. You don't walk to supervise. You don't walk to evaluate. You don't walk to play a game of gotcha. But I love that beginning of the daytime where if I'm not being pulled, and I'm not always perfect at this either, but that beginning of the day where you just check in the classrooms, check in with folks. Hey, how you doing? How's it going, Sarah? How those two dogs doing? Are they okay? Any kind of rapport, I think, is important. The end of the day, I think, is important too. And you actually kind of helped me with this by introducing me to the pulse button, right, on the Engageable app. But just taking that time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 50 seconds, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, to just sit and be. Don't do anything. Don't get the sticky notes out. Don't do the checklist. Just to sit and be. I'm going to work on and kind of my goal for this upcoming school year is to work on doing that more throughout the day, so that I can be that presence for myself and for others, and really be cognizant of the bookends. Be cognizant of how I begin something, whether it's a conversation or meeting, and then making sure that ending is resolute, is peaceful or powerful or whatever it may be. Very, very, very much in the vein of albums, right? Like if an album is produced and programmed directly, there's a method to how those songs are lined up.
Right.
George Martin, Beatles, started off with a big raucous number. Then he would end side one with kind of a big number two, and then side two. There's just all these kind of moods and things. So I'm going to try to do that. So that would be my advice for leaders, is to really rethink and paradigm shift how you approach your day and how you fill your moments of your day. I think that's really, really important.
That was beautiful. We're going to put that on a rewind as well. There's 3 rewinds in this episode alone.
Ooh, 3.
3. And so now we come to the end, and I expect you almost to have the album queued up and ready to go here as we come to the end here. But where can people find you if they aren't already connected with you and are listening to us talk, and they would like to riff with you digitally somewhere? Where can they, where would you like them to follow you? And are there any places that websites or links you want people to know about that they can follow as well?
Well, I would say at any used record store, as I'm trying to track down the vinyl copies of the anthology series, the Beatles anthology series. So record stores are really the best places to find me. But digitally speaking,
officially the first person ever on a podcast, I think, to say you can find me physically in person. That's great. I love it.
Yeah, Underdog Records. It's on Burke Street in Winston-Salem, and that is usually where I tend to gravitate towards. So, but you can find me there. But if I'm not there and you would like to digitally connect with me, I am on the artist formerly known as Twitter. I guess it's X now. I don't know what we're calling it, but I'm on Twitter at SM Gaillard. I'm also on Instagram at SM Gaillard, and folks are welcome to. Folks usually will direct message me through those venues, and I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as Sean Gaillard, so I'm on those places as well. And then another landing spot is the Principal Liner Notes podcast that I have. So if you follow hashtag Principal Liner Notes, you can find me there on the Spotify podcast app as well there. But that's kind of another landing spot. So however folks want to connect, I'm
Now, how would you feel if you were just browsing the record store one day and someone came up to you? This is where it'd be funny if you were like, I'm there every Saturday from 11 to 2. And oh my god! Now you're getting ideas in my head of like ways to branch out at how to connect the podcasting world to building an in-person community, like web of people, like not having people give their social media anymore, but give a place to connect with them in real time.
Yeah, that we just shifted the paradigm there. That would be kind of neat, But yeah,
we're climbing up the ladder, Sean. We're making it to the rooftop. We're going to get there.
We are. We're making it there. I'm carrying the keyboard. You've got the Hofner bass, and we're getting ready to play loud and proud and strong. And the Bobbies are right behind us, getting ready to pull the plug.
Thanks to Sean for lending some time and attention to us today to give us the much-needed principles point of view on enacting building-wide practices to transform self-awareness, attention, and ultimately, personal engagement. So let's hear what you're thinking. Sean and I would love for you to tweet your favorite bit of this episode and tag us at #LetItBe on Twitter. You can also let us know by leaving a comment on Substack, a review in Apple Podcasts, or you can reach me on Twitter at scandela9. You can listen and subscribe to the Optimalist podcast wherever you love listening to great podcasts. New episodes are released every Wednesday, and links to all of these resources are available in the show notes. The Optimalist podcast is brought to you by Engageable, the only app that gives you the mindful pause you need for better attention. And it's free. Create an account today at getengageable.com or by downloading Engageable on any iOS or Android device. You can also follow us at Get Engageable on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening to The Optimalist. I'll be back next week with a new conversation. Stay engaged.